afternoon, and welcome to this monthly webinar on ProjectHQ. My name is Ryan Czaplinski, and today we're going to be taking a look at a couple of different documents that we have available in HQ, primarily punch list and subcontracts, how we can enter those, and how they're tracked in Foundation and in ProjectHQ. As we go through the webinar today, if you have any questions, feel free to throw those in the questions box in the GoToMeeting, and then I will get those answered either at the end of the call or as we're going through the webinar here today. And there is a little bit of a change to the topics here. So in the GoToMeeting or the GoToWebinar, it does say that we are going to cover meeting minutes today. I will show a user-defined document, which we can enter meeting minutes in, but there's not a specific entry screen for meeting minutes, at least not yet. So without further ado, we'll take a look at a couple of different entries here. We'll start with the meeting minutes. So to recap some of the things that we've covered in some previous webinars, and anybody that's been on training with me, you would have heard this as well. We do have the ability in the setup to create what are called user-defined documents. And so for anything that we may not have an actual entry screen for example, meeting minutes, we didn't program a specific entry screen for meeting minutes, you can create a user-defined document called meeting minutes, and we can use that for the entry. So under user-defined documents, perfect time for my internet to cut out. I apologize if anyone can still hear me. I'm having some technical difficulties here. Give me one moment, please. I apologize for the interruption there. I was just having some technical difficulties. Apparently my Ethernet plug came out of my laptop and I got disconnected here. I apologize. If someone could please throw a question in the question box and just let me know that you can see the screen and that you can hear me, that would be wonderful. I just want to make sure we are all. Okay, thank you. All right, so back to where we started here. So under user-defined documents, you will find here that there is a document called meeting minutes. Even though we call these user-defined documents, we did create a handful of examples here for you. You are able to turn these on and off as a user. And then, of course, being user-defined, you can create your own. So when we created meeting minutes, we simply typed the words meeting minutes here, and then selected the add value button to add that to the user-defined document section here. So now when we go into a project and navigate to work management, which is where our document storage or document management is done from, under documents, we'll find user-defined documents. And then we have a spot where we can now go in and enter meeting minutes. So here we can create a new meeting minutes entry. And all of the user-defined documents have the same entry screen. So the fields that we see here under general, down here under correspondence, and then any custom fields that we add to user-defined documents, and the attachment section here would all be available, and they're all the same in all of these user-defined documents. So as it pertains to meeting minutes, this is kind of a workaround right now until we get a meeting minutes entry screen programmed into ProjectHQ. We would be able to use this user-defined document to either upload maybe the notes you have from a meeting, or enter the actual meeting minutes here using the description and the remarks box. We do have 20,000 characters between these two fields. And then you can also create your own custom fields. You can add additional boxes just like this. So if you did need more room for notes, or if you wanted different categories for recording different things within a meeting, you would be able to go through and record that and add your own user-defined fields here. So again, we still can technically track meeting minutes. It's just going to be in a user-defined document that was on the docket for the webinar today. I believe when we scheduled these webinars, we had planned to have a meeting minutes form out there, which is not really a high priority item right now, so that's not been released. So the other entries that we are going to look at here today, the next one would be a punch list. And so here again, within our project, I'm going to switch to a different job here, one that doesn't have anything in it. We can navigate over to our work management, and we will find a specific entry screen for punch list. So you may see this in two different places. Similar to what I just described for the meeting minutes, prior to us programming an actual official punch list entry screen, we created it as a user-defined document. So if you go to documents and user-defined, I think I have mine turned off, but you may see actually I don't. You can see punch list here. We also have punch list on the menu. This was kind of the old method or the workaround before we had that actual punch list entry screen. So unless you have some entered here, you could probably turn this one off or delete this one. We would want to use the actual punch list entry screen. So again, you may see punch list in two different places. We can create as many different punch lists for one job as we want. Each punch list that gets created would have a specific location and a specific category and a title, and then could have multiple items within that one punch list. And you can create as many of these for one project as you like. So my example here is going to be, I'm going to try to keep it simple so I think everyone can get their heads around this regardless of what trade you are. I refinished a room, so I'm going to have a punch list for the ceilings, another one for the walls, and another one for the doors and windows. So if we go to create a punch list here, the first thing that comes up is the title. So in my case here, in my residential punch list that I'm doing for this building or my house, whatever it may be, I have one punch list for the ceilings. The location would be, maybe first floor, second floor, third floor. If you're doing a commercial building, you can identify the floor. If it's some sort of road or highway or something like that, north side or of the road, east side of the road, you would define the location of the punch list based on where these items need to be completed. So in my case, we'll say this is the ceilings of the second floor. We can prioritize this. So it simply changes the color of the priority when we're looking at all of our punch lists and just identifies how urgent that punch list is to complete. The category here, we're typing this in. So for me, maybe this is finishes or paint and drywall or something like that. Again, different trades and different companies are going to have different categories here depending on what you do. This is just user defined. You're just typing this in. Who's assigning the punch list, who we're assigning it to, and then the overall status of the punch list. Now, as we add items to this list, the individual items will also have a status. So this is the overall status for the entire list. And then we can check off items or mark that certain items were canceled or on hold. So we'll have these same statuses at the item level as well as at the kind of top punch list level here. And I'll say we've not started this one yet. Who we're assigning this to. So I'm going to go ahead and just assign this to myself so we can see what gets emailed here. But this would be the person in the field, your foreman, your super. If this is something we're self-performing, this could be a subcontractor or somebody that does not work for your company or does not use HQ. And we can still email them a notification and give them a list of these punch list items. Dates here, date we created it, the date the punch list is due. So we'll give ourselves to the end of the month here. And then what date we have actually completed this once it's done. You do have a 10,000 character description box here. You can insert hyperlinks into this. One cool workaround with the hyperlinks, anywhere that you have these text boxes, you can put hyperlinks in here. Maybe you want to put in a link to a Google map. Maybe there's a specific location you want them to be able to navigate to for this punch list. Anything that might be out on the web, you can create a hyperlink. And then you do have, again, 10,000 characters to type in maybe what order you want them to go through the items or any special notes for how to complete this punch list. Then we would add our items here. So we're simply selecting the Add Items button. And this is pretty basic, and what I always tell everybody in training is you're going to have a better idea of what you're going to put in here more so than my example is going to display for you. So these would be all of the individual items that we're completing within this one punch list. So in my case, this is 4 ceilings again. So my first item here might be visible seal or tape joints. And then here I can put any specific notes about, specifically what they're looking for, how I want them to check this. And then you can attach, as long as you're signed into your file hosting service, and we have a project folder created for this job, you are able to attach attachments here. So you have to be signed into Dropbox, and then we would select to upload an attachment from my device, and then you can browse your device for that picture or PDF or whatever it may be. Then you can continue to add items here. So I might have another item. Are there any cracks? And same thing, additional notes, put an attachment here. Let's go ahead and attach something to these. Just a picture. And we'll do one more item. I don't think I need to bore you to death with all these items here. And that may not be part of ceilings, it may be more fire suppression, but for my punch list, that's what we're going to do there. And then again, you can upload an attachment. Maybe there's a drawing or something like that that we want to attach related to that punch list item. Once we have all of our items added here, we can select done, and we've now finished that entry. So from here, just like other documents, RFIs, submittals, change orders in the ProjectHQ, we are able to save this and create an email and send this off to whoever the recipient is. So in this case, me. Since we have attachments on there, it does take an extra tick here just to get those attachments uploaded before it saves. And here's an example of the email that gets sent. So this is a different punch list than the one I just did. This is a different example that I already had in my inbox. But this one does come over here in the body of the email. This yellow bar is something that Foundation, my company, does. It doesn't have anything to do with what you'd see in the email. So we can see here the body of the email, what comes over, and then the PDF attachment here of the actual punch list. So using the save and send button, that's what gets sent. Go away PDF. And then you can also view the punch list here. So it would just pull up a view of that punch list as it was entered in HQ. Yes, so a couple questions came in here. So one was, can you upload pictures to a punch list? Yep, the one that I entered here, each of these items, well, not this one, sorry. This one, got two open now. This one does have those pictures assigned here to the items. Anybody who's got access to ProjectHQ, as they're going in and looking at this punch list, they would be able to view those pictures, provided that they have access to Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive where these pictures are stored. Robert, to answer your question, there's not an app for ProjectHQ. You can log directly in using the browser on your phone, and then you can upload photos or any attachments that you may have on your device, as long as you're signed into Dropbox, Google Drive, or OneDrive. We don't store any files on the website. All the files are stored, any outside attachments are stored in one of those file hosting services. So again, no app, you can upload photos, and this does everything that we've shown here on any webinars in the past or what I'm showing here today. All of this does apply whether you're on a cell phone, a tablet, or a computer. But you've got to be signed into one of the file hosting services, and we've got to make sure that we have a folder created for your job. So if you're not signed into Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive here, and you don't see these folders, then no, you cannot upload any attachments or any photos. But as long as we've got all this, it doesn't matter what device you're on, this will work. So now we want to go back in and we want to update that punch list. So if I go back to my punch list here under work management, there's a couple different ways that we can update this. If the whole thing is done, if somebody went out and, you know, in my example, I've got 3 items here. It's not a very big punch list. I'm sure yours will be a little bit longer here. But if the whole thing is done, from here, we can check this box and we can say mark as completed. That would go in and mark all the items and mark the whole thing as completed. If certain items are done, maybe we knocked out one of these items, but not all 3, you can select the punch list here. And without having to go in and actually edit it where we did the entry, you can flip over to the items here in the view of the punch list, and you could just check these off. And then it fills our status bar. So 1 of 3 items are completed. It's a third of the way filled. And then you do have some options here if you wanted to add any new items, to mark them all as completed, or mark all the items as completed, or mark certain ones as completed. The only thing that you would have to do in the edit mode here, or to go and actually modify this, would be to change the overall status. So if I mark all the items as completed, then the overall status would be switched to completed automatically. But if I just check off one item like I've done here, you can see it's not updating my status. So this is no longer not started if I already have an item complete. To change that, I would select edit, and then I can go in and make changes to that status. We do have the ability to duplicate a punch list. So if you hover over a punch list here, you can select duplicate. So if I was doing, you know, a commercial building and it was 10 stories, I'm going to have the same punch list for floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, floor 4. So we will have the ability to copy those so you don't have to recreate it every time. Right now, we are copying them within jobs. In the future, we will add the ability to copy from one job to another. You know, we understand a lot of the punch lists would be the same from job to job. So we'll allow you to do that. Right now, it is just copying them from within a job. Here's that other one. So this is the one I created together with you guys here today. So same thing. This is what was sent over. And then we can view the punch list here to see any of those attachments. So that's really all to the punch list. Compared to some of the other documents, I will say this one's a little bit more of a basic entry. Most of the information that you're populating in this punch list is information that you would readily have available to you. It's not anything that we're forcing you to do a certain way, or that you have to set up ahead of time and then select in a drop down. So you've got a lot of flexibility and a lot of control there to kind of enter the information that you need to enter for your specific punch list. And then to update them, you can either go in and edit the punch list and check off the items within the entry, or we can do it here from the view, just selecting the punch list and then going in and checking off the items. That's really it. If you have any other questions on that, feel free to put them in the questions box, and then I can answer them at the end of the call here. So last thing here for today's webinar is going to be subcontract entry. So as of right now, in the committed cost section, and this is going to change, there are 3 different records that we can key in here. We can key in purchase orders, we can key in change orders to POs, and we can key in subcontracts. The ability to do a subcontract change order should be out here in the next couple of weeks, but technically right now you cannot do a change order for subcontracts. So for today's webinar, we will take a look at an entry of a subcontract. Before we go over to the entry, I do want to just cover one quick thing, because it will kind of fall into the same talk here, the same explanation. In the setup of ProjectHQ, you have an option here that says subcontracts. We are able to go in and add additional subcontract statuses. So if there's different statuses that we want to set up here, maybe you have a status called draft. So as you're creating it and gathering information and typing up the subcontract, it's in draft. And then once it's done in draft, then you move it over to open. And you can create your own here. The 3 that come with the system are approved, pending, and rejected. You might want to create like an open and a closed, or some different statuses there to keep track of these. We allow you to pick and choose what fields you want to be required. So in my system, I cannot enter a subcontract and save it unless I have a title. Maybe we want to make sure there's always retainage in there, or you've got control over what fields we give you that we want to be required here. The big one here, especially for subcontracts, is going to be adding custom fields. So there's a lot of information that may be unique to a certain subcontract or to a certain subcontractor. And if you find that you feel like there's fields missing from the entry, we can add them here. And then as we create our actual subcontract agreement and our subcontract form and our printable template, we can pull in the standard fields that we give you in the entry plus any custom fields that you add. So there shouldn't be any reason that we couldn't do all of the entry of these subcontracts in HQ and then produce effectively a 20 or 30 page document with all the legal jargon and everything that would add up to your subcontract. With our template editor here in HQ, you can upload PDFs and you can upload Word documents. So if you already have your 30-page subcontract agreement, we'll load it in here. That information would all be boilerplate text. So we would need to go through and replace anything that changes, right? Like the job number, for example. On one job number is going to be one job number. On a different job, it's going to be a different number. So we would have not just a static field with a job number, we'd have a field that would pull from HQ, a merge field. So we're not going to cover that here today. There is another webinar out there in our on our YouTube channel if you did want to take a look at how to edit these templates and how to import them. But this is a good reminder that this is here. As you do the entry of a subcontract in the actual entry in a project, we'd then be able to email or print that subcontract on whatever forms that we have created here. My example is pretty basic. It basically looks like a one-page PO. But again, you can take a PDF or a Word document and load those in here. So that way we're using your actual subcontractor agreement with your logo and your letterhead and all of the information that would pull from HQ and show here. So in a project, and I'm going to go into one where I've got some entry already. If we flip over to our cost management, in order for me to enter a PO or a subcontract and to identify what cost code I'm committing cost to, you got to have a budget here. If the budget is not pulled over into HQ, then you cannot budget change orders and you cannot budget any of the committed costs because your job doesn't have a budget. If you work in Foundation or you work here in HQ and you don't use the budgeting function, that's fine. You can still enter them. But we will need to make sure that the budget is shown here. This is just a button click. So we would hit either the sync button if we've already pulled the budget over and we just want to make sure that it's updated to reflect the most recent Foundation info. If we've not ever done this and this is blank, then there would be a button in the middle that says import budget from Foundation. So we want to make sure that's done first. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to pick a cost code in my subcontract here. And then we would go over to the committed cost section and we're going to create a new subcontract. The landing page here will show me all of the contracts that I have, any that are open. If I'm entering a due date in my subcontract entry, then it can show me what's overdue and upcoming. And then as I mark these as closed, then they would go to the closed section here. Any of the commitments that we're entering in ProjectHQ, the commitment number, in this case, the subcontract number, will automatically fill in. You cannot enter that here. This is pulling from Foundation. It's looking up whatever the next PO or subcontract number is in the accounting system. You do have control over it there. You can change it so it's just one set of numbers. You can tell it what number to start at, or you can also set it up in a way where it'll number the PO with the job number as the prefix and then the PO number, which is how mine is set up here. So I believe I'm on maybe commitment number 60 or 61 or something. So my number here would be 14001 because that's my job number dash 060 because it's the 60th commitment that I put in for this job. It doesn't matter if it's a purchase order or a subcontract. There is just that one running number of commitment numbers, and it's the same as it is in Foundation. The title here, so this is going to be my electrical subcontractor. So this is going to be the contract for them to come out and do this electrical work in my commercial building. We saw in the setup where you can kind of create your own statuses here and change what's here. So I'm going to call this open. You do have an option to put payment terms on here. So when this vendor bills me, the invoice is going to be due in 45 days. And then my subcontractor / vendor here, which is pulling from the contact list in HQ. Now I want to show an example here, and I realize this is not a subcontractor, but my material supplier is the same thing. It's only going to let us select a vendor if this company is linked to a foundation vendor. So if we had gone in and just created a new company in HQ, but never linked it to any foundation vendor, then you cannot pick it here, because we're going to push these subcontracts and the POs. The same is true for the purchase orders. We're going to push these from HQ into foundation so they update the accounting system. Well, if I push it into foundation, I have to be able to identify what vendor is on that PO in foundation. And this isn't going to create a new vendor over there. So we got to make sure that the vendor exists in foundation and it's linked to the ProjectHQ vendor here. Now, this happens automatically if you set up your vendors in foundation first and then you import them into HQ. They're already linked together, so you don't have to go do anything separate. This is why in training, if you've worked with me at all, I highly recommend that, especially vendors, new vendors and subcontractors, and then your projects, we create them in foundation first, and then you import them here. Not only is it saving you that dual entry of having to create a record in two places, but more importantly, it's linking the records together. So I know that that ABC subcontractor vendor in foundation is tied to ABC subcontractor here in HQ. So again, gray bar is not really an example of a subcontractor, but you can see here how I have two of them. One of them is grayed out. That's because I just created them here in HQ. The other one I could select, and more in a PO than a sub, but I could pick them here because the other gray bar is linked to some vendor in foundation. I'm going to overthink. There you go, these guys. So that's my subcontractor on this particular job, or in my case, my electrical sub here. The date we created this, the date we sent it. So maybe it took us a day or two to type up all the info and get the exhibits A and B and C and all that stuff together. The due date or respond by date. If we fill this in, then I can tell you when this is overdue or when it's upcoming. If we don't fill this in, then the reporting or the widgets cannot tell you when it's due or when it's overdue. We have our retainage % field here, so we can fill in if there's any retainage on this sub. And then we do have these two description boxes here. So this first description box is 32,000 characters, so it's a pretty big description. This is where ideally we're typing up the actual scope of work and any pertinent information that is unique to this subcontract. Then you have any notes here, which is a separate field, so we can add this to the actual subcontract agreement or to the template, and we would be able to pull these things into the printed form and show that wherever you'd like to see it. So if we are listing out, again, exhibits A and B and things change, or if we have maybe different insurance requirements, the minimum for workers' comp and for liability insurance and those things, that type of information would best fit here in the description, because that may be changing from subcontractor to subcontractor on one job, or it may be different from job to job depending on insurance requirements or what the work is and what different exhibits you may have. So this 32,000 character description box, where you can insert hyperlinks, you can do outline and bullet point formats here, you can do carriage returns, and actually hit enter in this without it jumping to another field or anything. You can make this full screen. So it's not like you have to work in that little box. You can type everything up here full screen. So there's a lot of different ways to get that detail in there. And then if you run out of room, it's 32,000 characters, which sounds like a lot until you actually start typing up a 20-page subcontract. But you can add custom fields here. So if you run out of room in this box, then you just create another one and create as many of those text boxes as you would need to get all of the pertinent information in here. Maybe we're creating a user-defined field called insurance requirements and another one called exhibits. You can create specialized fields to take that info if needed. Sent from, of course, is going to default to me because I'm the one who's logged in here into HQ. And then sent to would be the subcontractor that I'm sending this to. Generally speaking, across all of the sent from and sent to fields, you can only pick people. So I'm not going to be able to pick Brazil Electric here as who I'm sending this to. I could pick, the PM there or the owner of that company or whoever at that company. But I am picking a person, not a company in the sent to. So I'll send this to myself. Again, generally speaking, I recommend that you copy yourself on these. If we're using the save and send button, then ProjectHQ is generating the email, which means it doesn't go through your email. It doesn't hit your inbox or your outbox. It didn't come from you. It came from the ProjectHQ website. But if you copy yourself on here, then you get a copy of it in your inbox. And then if Ryan replies all, then they're going to reply to you on there as well as the additional recipient. So wouldn't hurt to copy yourself on pretty much anything you send out of HQ if you want that to start flagging your mailbox. Otherwise, the emails are sent from the ProjectHQ website. So the majority of the detail of this can and probably will come from these description boxes and any custom fields that you add. There is a spot here that is required, this items section. So when we hit add items here, whether I'm doing a purchase order or a subcontract, I have to enter these items. I have to have at least one item in a PO or a sub. And so with a subcontract, if the majority of my details coming from that prior screen, the description boxes and the custom fields and typing up whatever needs to go into the subcontract, you can get away with doing the bare minimum here. Just because you have to fill this in doesn't mean that this info has to print anywhere on the subcontract. You have control over that template. So if it were me, what I would do here is just make ProjectHQ happy. We're going to put in here something like electrical sub because that's what this one is for. And then I'm going to come over to the very end and my subcontract for this electrical company is $25,000. From here, we can then identify what cost code that $25,000 is being committed to. This green button is our budget impact button. If we select that, we're going to pick what cost code and then what cost class we're committing cost to. And this is the kind of the bare minimum of what you would need here. And again, in my experience or in my opinion, if most of the other info is going to be entered and come from that prior screen, really we just have to do this so we can get our amount and our cost code and our cost class here. And then all of the other detail would be entered in the description boxes and again, in the custom field. Now that might be one example for like an electrical sub or an HVAC sub. For different companies that maybe do more detailed tracking of this. So instead of this being an electrical sub, maybe I have underground utilities. I need somebody to dig, dig some holes and lay some pipe and things like that. Well, you can use these line items to put that info in. Some companies actually do track line item detail within a subcontract. And so you could, depending on how your company operates and what trade you are, you could put here, this is for trenching. And, we're going to dig a 200-foot trench. And that's going to cost $25 a foot. I don't know if that makes sense or not. And then we're going to have another one here where we install 6-inch RDP. And we're going to do 180 feet of that. And for each foot of that, it's 15 a foot. And then we identify the budget impact here. And again, in my example, I don't have one that makes sense, but it wouldn't be electrical. But you could pick your cost code and your subcontractor cost type there. So that way we're coding this line item to the correct cost code and cost class. So just because my example is, pretty basic and we're saying, you just put a very basic description and then a total here, that's all that ProjectHQ needs in order to get this contract updated in the accounting and commit cost to where it needs to be committed to, and then most of the other information would come from the prior screen. You can use the line items here. Some users of Foundation, and I assume that they'll eventually use this as well, would actually keep track of this. How many feet did the subcontractor complete so far, and how many have they billed against this? So there is some additional detailed tracking that can happen here. I think for the majority of users of this, it's going to be maybe the one-liner that just says electrical sub and then whatever the total is. but there definitely is flexibility here if you are tracking more detailed line items. So we'll kind of stick with our electrical sub-example. So there's not feet of electrical. Get rid of that. There's not a unit cost for electrical, but the total contract's 25 grand. So then we can hit done here. We've made ProjectHQ happy, as I like to kind of say. We've got our amount in there. It's a $25,000 subcontract. And then again, I'm not going to copy and paste a bunch of subcontract jargon in here, but all of your legal information, exhibits A, B, and C, insurance info, whatever else may print on that subcontract agreement that's not boilerplate text would be entered in these description boxes or in the custom fields. And then you can attach backup to this. So if you have any outside attachments that you did want to attach, or maybe there's a drawing or something that goes with this, insurance information, maybe you have like lien waivers or documents that you want them to sign that's part of this. If it's not built into your template, you can still attach them here. So you can put attachments on these as well. And then once we have all of that information entered here, you can send that subcontract agreement and email that directly from the ProjectHQ website. So I can say save and send. That'll send my subcontract agreement there. And then there's different workflows for this. Maybe the subcontract has already been agreed to, and all I'm doing is typing that up here and getting that in and getting it sent off to them. And so it's ready to hit the accounting. I can push this into Foundation and have it update the accounting right now. Or maybe we want to wait, we just send it out. Maybe that we even put this in as pending instead of open like I did. And we wait for them to sign it, maybe get it notarized, all that fun stuff, and then get it sent back. And then maybe at that point, we push it to Foundation. It's up to you depending on the workflow there. And does this need to get approved? Are you printing the full subcontract agreement here? And so on. Point is, at some point, this is going to need to get pushed into Foundation. We're going to need this to update our accounting system. In the future, we're going to get an invoice from the subcontractor, and we're going to need to match up that invoice against the PO or that subcontract number. So we've got to have this in the accounting system. So there's two places that you can do this from. When we were doing the entry and we were editing this, your save button here, if I change something, your save button here is actually two different buttons. The word save would just save this in HQ. The arrow would save it into HQ and push it to Foundation. But when we did the entry, what I always tell people in training is we want to do three things with this potentially. We want to email it, we want to save it in HQ, and we want to push it to Foundation. There's not one button that does all three. So what I always do is kind of what I did in this example. I would save it and email it. And then on the next screen that comes up, you just go to this Actions button, and then you select Push to Foundation. If you're not familiar with how to get here, I've been trying to make a bigger point of this in training. The Actions button is very, very, very useful. So we're going to push this into Foundation, and then I'm going to show you how I got here. From any of the what we call landing pages. So when you click on Work Management here and you pick Documents, this is a landing page. So on all these landing pages where you have the number bubbles, you can select, I want to see all the 28 open RFIs here in this example. That takes you to a list of all those documents. If you want to go edit one of these, you hover over the line, and then you slide over to the right here and you select the Edit button. That takes you right in to make changes. If you select the document from here, it takes you to a view of the document, and you get this Actions button. The Actions button is really useful. You can create action items from here. Maybe I want somebody to follow up on this RFI. You can print from here. You can email from here. Things that can be pushed into Foundation, you get the Push to Foundation option. When we're talking submittals, you can do a revision to a submittal as one of the actions. So it's useful to know kind of how to get here, or that you can do this. And then in different documents, you can even update information in them. If I go into submittals and do the same thing, and I select so here's my submittal number 44, which does have a revision number 1 for it. You can see what items were on the original submittal as well as the revisions. So this is looking at revision 1. So I've got 4 items there because I added 1 when I did the revision. And I can look at the original. You can update the statuses here. You can add new items from here. So I know I've overlooked this a little bit in training. It's a pretty important area. You can track the emails, all the emails back and forth here for this document, any attachments, all that stuff, plus that actions button is available when you select a document from that list. A little bit of a tangent there, but you are able to push the subcontracts into Foundation using that actions button. Same thing with the purchase orders and the change orders in cost management. Just because we created a commitment in ProjectHQ on the operations side of the business does not mean that automatically just updates the accounting. The accounting folks don't like that. So there's an import that we have to do in Foundation. Somebody in Foundation's got to look at any change orders that we sent, or in this case, the committed costs. We've got to look at and review the POs and subcontracts, and then we've got to select an import button to pull those in. So go ahead and get logged into Foundation here real quick. Oops, sorry for the delay, guys. I signed out of my VPN when I got my internet issue here earlier. Okay. All right, sorry about that. We'll spend more time in HQ now. I didn't even have Foundation open today. So on the Foundation accounting side, in the PO module, under Daily, there's a thing here that says PO sub and change orders sync. So this is going to allow us to review any of the POs, subcontracts, or PO change orders that were sent from ProjectHQ into Foundation. We can narrow this list down by job, vendor, or date. Otherwise, it's just going to show all of the POs or subcontracts that were sent over. And here's the one I just did. So it shows me today's date. It was a subcontract. There's my PO number, or my subcontract number in this case, my vendor, and then it's $25,000 for whatever I described it as. So this is the title from that entry. From here, we select the import button or checkbox, and then click the import button to finalize this and actually have it create that purchase order for us. Now, when you do this, there's one thing that we're not going to ask for in the field that we got to have here in the accounting. That is a general ledger account. General ledger account is not a thing in ProjectHQ, and it never will be. We're not adding GL accounts there. It's in the operations side. But in Foundation, on the accounting side, we got to have a GL account in our PO, because the PO is going to have to match the invoice, and you got to have a GL account in your invoice. So there's a lot of different variations to how this will work. And the biggest thing that determines how this is going to work is, does your company have the inventory module? In Foundation, if you have the inventory module applied, that will affect how this GL account fills in automatically. So in a perfect world, what we would do here is just click the OK button, and then the system would go out and it would look up the GL account for us. Depending on if you have inventory or not, that may or may not work successfully. Because if you have inventory, it's just going to go look up your material expense account, which works fine when we're doing purchase orders. But when you do a subcontract, you're going to have to make sure that you pick a different account. If you don't have the inventory module, this is a little bit easier. So is purchasing and using Foundation in general if you don't have the inventory module. But without the inventory module, it looks up the vendor. on your vendor records, you can assign a general ledger expense account. And so if I go into all my subs and I put the subcontract expense, and I go into all my equipment rental companies and I put the equipment rental expense, then when you get these commitments in there and you hit OK, it would just fill in automatically. I set up my system first possible case. So in my case here, I hit OK, and the GL account does not fill in correctly. It looks up this number one temporary account that fills in, and that is incorrect. And so worst case here, we enter the GL account. My subcontract expense, I believe, is $5,200. There we go, direct subcontract. So I key in that account, I hit OK, error message goes away, and I'm saving this. So the bottom line is, when this gets imported, the GL account can fill in automatically, but somebody on the accounting side or whoever's importing these is going to be responsible for making sure that we get the correct GL account in here. For, I don't know what the percentage would be, like 90% of our users, there's like 3 accounts that you would use. It's either materials, equipment rental, or a subcontract expense. Now, everyone's GL is a little different, so you could have more detail or less detail there, but generally speaking, most people have one account for subcontracts, one for materials, and one for equipment rental. And so worst case, we got to pick which one of those 3 accounts applies to this commitment, because we're not asking for that in the field. Now that we have that in here, we're able to save this. There is this status window. It was down here. I didn't draw any attention to it, but it was down here as we were entering that purchase order, or saving that subcontract, I should say. And so this is just keeping track that we did finish that. If we imported it and then started going through the entry that we just saw, but we hit cancel and we bail out, then it's going to tell us that we canceled. So now we can go import it again. So this is just ensuring that we took that record from import through processing and that it is in there and saved. And then if you had imported like 10 POs at once, it's just going to take you through one at a time and show you, okay, you completed number 1, you're processing number 2, you still have 3 through 10 to do. And that way you can keep track of where you are and you're not getting lost in, trying to import multiple POs at one time. So that is the subcontract entry. And again, a lot of that is going to be customized stuff. Creating custom fields, having a custom template, being able to put the actual longer form subcontract agreement in there and load up, your boilerplate legal information, as well as information that may change from job to job. And then we took a look at the punch list and meeting minutes. I mentioned this earlier. It's not a terribly high priority item because we kind of have a place where you can put that already. It's not requested a ton. We will add a separate place for meeting minutes at some point in the future, but it will be probably a little while before that gets added. So we can use the user defined document to keep track of safety meetings, kickoff meetings, PM meetings, or anything like that you may have for a project. That is all I have for today. This will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. I will now open it up for any questions. We'll kind of leave it open here for a couple minutes. If anybody has any questions on really anything related to what we talked about or anything in HQ, please feel free to fire that into the question box there, and then I will get that answered for you. So Connor asks, will there be a mobile app for ProjectHQ? No plans to do that now. So we have gone that route with some of our other products, and from what I understand, it does create a little bit harder to manage because there's the iOS store and the Android store and the Windows store, and there's different applications. We have to have different people that program and test it, and there's not a ton of advantage of it being in an app. So with it being what we call a web app, it would be 100% web-based. Anything that has a web browser you can navigate to, and it does look a little bit different, and it does format to a smaller device. So even though it is just a web page, if you look at it on a computer on a big screen, it looks a little bit different than it does on a phone, just to make sure that you can fit everything within that device. So again, not any plans to do any kind of app in the near future, and I don't think we have any plans even long term to do that. Chad asks, if you create a subcontract, is there a way to upload modified or executed subcontracts? So are you referring to the template there? If you already had like a subcontract that was done and executed, and we want to create a printable form for that, we would upload the executed one and then make changes to it. Am I understanding that right? Okay, then yes, you can. Any Word document, any PDF, if it has stuff filled in, if your contract value's in there and there's a job filled in, what we would do when we upload the template is we would highlight the value and we would delete it, and then we would add a field that says PO price, and then it would just pull the price from the subcontract that we enter. Same thing for job. If it had a job number filled in, that's okay. Well, we'd have to modify that template anyway to get rid of that boilerplate job number and then replace it with a field that says ProjectHQ job number effectively. So that would be fine. It could be a blank one. It could be one that's filled in, and then we'll just make changes to that template in the program here in the template editor. Nicole asks, when you push over to Foundation, will the full description and notes box show on the form in Foundation? So let me go back to the PO that we just imported here, or the subcontract. Make sure we're talking about the same thing. So where I had, didn't I put electrical sub S there? Oh, I clicked on the wrong one. There it is. So just to make sure I'm following that question there. So when I entered my electrical sub into HQ, my title, where it says electrical subcontractor S, is what populates here under description. And this description is limited, so we may have more characters in HQ than we do here, so that one may get cut off. I'd have to test that though. And then as far as the printed form goes, anything that you have entered in HQ or in Foundation can be printed on the form. I'm sorry, Nicole, I don't know if I answered your question or if I'm following that right. The description that you have in the title in HQ will push over to the description field here, and then this description can be printed on the purchase order form in either HQ or in Foundation, as long as you have a box, the field for description pulling into the form. And as far as these forms go too, guys, you technically have, I could print it from here too. If you already had a PO form in Foundation and you had no reason to generate the actual form from HQ, technically you can create the record in HQ, push it into Foundation, then print it from here. So you do have the option of printing the POs and subcontracts from either system, because it does go into Foundation the same way that they did if you had keyed it in the past. This description would not, if you're referring to this one. It would print on the form, but this longer 32,000 character description, there's really not a place for that to go in Foundation. So that would print on the form from HQ, but is not being pushed into Foundation. Any custom fields that you've done, if you created any here, those do not push into Foundation because it's a custom field for HQ only. But you can print the forms from either system. Any other questions? All right, so this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. I believe they will send an email to you guys just to notify you that that is done. Very much appreciate you joining the webinar here today. If you have any questions or you need any help, you can call Foundation Support. And again, my name is Ryan Japlensky. If you need to reach out to me, show you my email here real quick. I'm the main person that does the training and support here in HQ. So if you need anything, this is your best bet. Thanks again, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and end the call now. Have a great rest of your day.